Someone in your life is manipulating you right now, not with obvious threats or visible control, but with psychological tactics so subtle you don't even realize it's happening. They're rewriting your reality, shifting your emotions, and controlling your decisions while convincing you it's all your idea. The average person encounters manipulation daily. In relationships, at work, in friendships, even within families. And the most dangerous manipulators are the ones you trust. The ones who smile while they undermine you. The ones who make you feel crazy for noticing what they're doing. In the next 25 minutes, I'm going to walk you through 7 psychological manipulation tactics that operate below conscious awareness. How to recognize them, why they work, and most importantly, how to protect yourself. Because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. And that awareness is your defense. Let's expose the game. Welcome back to Psychopath, where we decode your mind. If you're ready to spot manipulation before it controls you, hit subscribe because this gets dark. Before we dive into the tactics, we need to understand what manipulation actually is, because not all influence is manipulation. Persuasion is presenting information and allowing someone to make their own decision. Manipulation is using psychological tactics to control someone's thoughts, emotions, or behaviors for your benefit, often against their best interests, while hiding your true intentions. The key difference is consent and transparency. When someone manipulates you, they're bypassing your rational decision-making and targeting your emotional vulnerabilities without your awareness or permission. And here's what makes it so insidious. Good manipulators make you feel like everything is your choice, your idea, your fault. You don't feel controlled. You feel confused, off balance, like something's wrong but you can't quite identify what. That confusion is the manipulation working. Sign number 1. They use intermittent reinforcement to keep you hooked. This is one of the most powerful manipulation tactics in psychology, and it's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. Here's how it works. They don't treat you badly all the time. If they did, you'd leave. Instead, they alternate between kindness and cruelty, warmth and coldness, attention and neglect in an unpredictable pattern. Sometimes they're loving, supportive, making you feel special and valued. Other times they're critical, distant, or outright cruel. You never know which version you're going to get, and that unpredictability is the trap. Behavioral psychology research shows that intermittent reinforcement creates stronger behavioral conditioning than consistent reinforcement. When a rat presses a lever and gets food every time, it learns the pattern quickly and can also unlearn it quickly when the food stops. But when the rat gets food randomly, sometimes after 1 press, sometimes after 10, sometimes not at all, it becomes obsessed. It will press that lever compulsively, desperately, far more than the rat who got consistent rewards. That's what intermittent reinforcement does to the human brain. You become addicted to the good moments, constantly trying to figure out what you did right to earn them. Walking on eggshells to avoid the bad moments, blaming yourself when they happen. The manipulator has trained you to work for their approval without them having to give consistent effort. And you're so focused on earning the next hit of positive reinforcement that you don't realize you're being controlled. Sign number 2. They gaslight you to make you doubt your own perception. Gaslighting is a manipulation tactic where someone makes you question your memory, your perception, your sanity. They deny things they said or did, even when you have clear memory of them. They tell you you're too sensitive, too dramatic, imagining things. They rewrite history to make themselves look innocent and you look unstable. Here's a real example. You confront them about something hurtful they said. They respond with, "I never said that. You're making things up. You're so dramatic." You remember the conversation clearly. You remember how it made you feel. But they're so confident in their denial that you start to doubt yourself. Maybe you misheard. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you are too sensitive. That doubt is the goal. Once they plant that seed of self-doubt, you stop trusting your own judgment. And when you can't trust yourself, you become dependent on their version of reality. Gaslighting works because the human brain is actually not great at perfect recall. Memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. We remember the gist of things, and our brain fills in details. Manipulators exploit this. They introduce enough doubt that your brain starts to second-guess itself. Over time, this destroys your confidence and makes you easier to control, because you're constantly seeking their validation of what's real. Sign number 3. They use guilt and obligation to control your decisions. Master manipulators are experts at making you feel guilty for setting boundaries, saying no, or prioritizing your own needs. They weaponize your empathy and sense of responsibility. It might sound like, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." Or, "I guess I'm just not important to you." Or, "If you really cared about me, you would do this." They're not asking. They're emotionally blackmailing. They're attaching guilt to your autonomy so that every time you try to assert yourself, you feel like a bad person. And if you have a naturally empathetic or people-pleasing personality, this tactic is devastatingly effective. You end up prioritizing their needs over your own. Not because you want to, but because saying no feels like betrayal. Psychologically, this works through something called the reciprocity principle. Humans have a deep-seated need to repay debts, even emotional ones. If someone does something for you, you feel obligated to do something in return. Manipulators exploit this by either exaggerating what they've done for you, reminding you constantly, or doing unsolicited favors so they can hold them over you later. They create a sense of debt that you can never fully repay. And any time you try to establish boundaries or independence, they cash in that emotional debt to pull you back in line. Sign number 4. They isolate you from your support system. This is a classic manipulation tactic used by abusers, cult leaders, and toxic individuals. They slowly, subtly, cut you off from the people who care about you, who would call out the manipulation, who would support you leaving. It starts small. They criticize your friends. "She's such a bad influence. He doesn't really care about you." They create drama or tension whenever you spend time with others. They make you feel guilty for having outside relationships. "Why do you need other friends when you have me?" They monopolize your time and attention. Over time, your world shrinks. You stop seeing friends because it's easier than dealing with the manipulator's reaction. You stop confiding in family because the manipulator has convinced you they don't understand. And eventually, you're isolated. You have no outside perspective, no one to reality check what's happening, no support if you try to leave. This isolation is strategic. It removes witnesses. It removes alternative viewpoints. It makes you completely dependent on the manipulator for social connection, validation, and reality checks. And when you have no one else, you're far more likely to tolerate unacceptable behavior because leaving means being completely alone. Sign number 5. They play the victim to avoid accountability. No matter what they do, no matter how hurtful or destructive their behavior, they somehow always end up being the victim in the story. You try to address something they did wrong, and suddenly the conversation shifts. They're hurt that you would accuse them. They're the ones suffering. They've had such a hard life. And here you are, making things worse. You came to them with a legitimate concern, and now you're apologizing to them. This is a manipulation tactic called DARVO, which stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. First, they deny what they did. Second, they attack you for bringing it up. Third, they reverse the roles so they become the victim and you become the perpetrator. This tactic is psychologically brilliant because it exploits human empathy. Most people don't want to hurt others. When someone presents themselves as hurt or vulnerable, your instinct is to comfort and apologize, even if you did nothing wrong. The manipulator knows this. By playing the victim, they deflect accountability, make you feel guilty for even raising the issue, and train you to stop bringing up problems. Over time, you stop confronting them because every attempt ends with you apologizing and them getting away with everything. Sign number 6. They use triangulation to create jealousy and competition. Triangulation is when a manipulator brings a third person into the dynamic to create insecurity, jealousy, or competition. They might constantly compare you to someone else. Why can't you be more like her? They talk about how much another person appreciates them, understands them, or makes them happy, implying you're falling short. They might keep an ex lingering in the background, mentioning them casually to make you feel replaceable. Or they might pit two people against each other, telling each person different stories so you're competing for their approval or attention. The psychological purpose of triangulation is to destabilize you. When you feel like you're in competition, you work harder for their validation. You become desperate to prove you're good enough, worthy, irreplaceable. Your focus shifts from evaluating whether they're treating you well to proving yourself to them. This tactic also serves to isolate you further. If they've convinced you that other people don't really understand or appreciate you the way they do, or that you're uniquely difficult and no one else would tolerate you, you become more dependent on them and less likely to seek support elsewhere. Sign number 7. They use love bombing and future faking to hook you. This tactic is most common at the beginning of relationships, romantic or otherwise. But it can happen anytime a manipulator wants to reel you back in. Love bombing is overwhelming you with affection, attention, praise, and promises. They're intensely interested in you, constantly texting, showering you with compliments, making grand gestures, talking about the amazing future you'll have together. It feels incredible. It feels like you've finally found someone who truly sees you, values you, understands you. But here's the trap. Love bombing isn't about you. It's about creating a baseline of intensity that they can later withdraw to control you. Once you're hooked, once you're emotionally invested, the love bombing stops. The intensity disappears, and you spend the rest of the relationship trying to get back to that initial high, doing whatever it takes to earn back that level of attention and affection. Future faking is a related tactic where they make elaborate promises about the future to keep you invested. We're going to travel the world together. I'm going to marry you. We'll start a business. I'll change. Things will get better. These promises are designed to keep you holding on, tolerating present mistreatment because you're focused on the potential future. But that future never comes. The promises are constantly delayed, revised, or abandoned, and you're left confused, wondering why things aren't progressing, blaming yourself for not being patient enough, not supportive enough. The manipulator has no intention of keeping these promises. They're just tools to maintain your investment. Now let's talk about why manipulation works so effectively. It targets fundamental human psychological needs. The need for connection and belonging. The need for validation and approval. The need to believe we're good people who don't hurt others. Manipulators exploit these needs by creating situations where meeting these needs requires you to ignore your boundaries, betray your values, or sacrifice your well-being. They also exploit cognitive biases. The sunk cost fallacy makes you stay because you've already invested so much time, emotion, or resources. The confirmation bias makes you focus on the rare good moments and dismiss the pattern of bad ones. The normalcy bias makes you downplay red flags because you can't believe someone you care about would intentionally harm you. And the fundamental attribution error makes you blame yourself for the problems in the relationship rather than recognizing their behavior as abusive. Here's something critical to understand. Not all manipulators are consciously malicious. Some people manipulate because it's the only relationship model they learned. They grew up in manipulative environments, and this behavior is normalized for them. They're not evil masterminds twirling mustaches. They're people with unresolved trauma, personality disorders, or severe insecurity using the only tools they know to meet their needs. This doesn't excuse the behavior. It doesn't mean you should tolerate it. But it does mean that calling someone out as a manipulator might not lead to the dramatic realization you expect. They might genuinely believe they're the victim. They might not have the self-awareness to see their patterns, and you can't fix them. You can only protect yourself. So how do you protect yourself from manipulation? First, trust your instincts. If something feels off, if you feel confused, anxious, or constantly on edge around someone, that's information. Don't dismiss it as paranoia or sensitivity. Your subconscious often picks up on manipulation before your conscious mind can articulate it. Second, maintain outside relationships and perspectives. Manipulators thrive in isolation. Having friends, family, or a therapist who can offer objective feedback is crucial. Third, establish and enforce boundaries. Manipulators test boundaries constantly. If you say no and they push back, guilt you, or ignore it entirely, that's a red flag. Healthy people respect boundaries even when disappointed. Fourth, document things if you're dealing with chronic gaslighting. Keep a journal of conversations, events, how you felt. When someone denies reality, you'll have a record to trust. Fifth, educate yourself. The more you understand about manipulation tactics, the easier they are to spot. And finally, be willing to walk away. Sometimes the only way to protect yourself from a manipulator is to remove them from your life entirely. And I know that's easier said than done, especially if it's a family member, romantic partner, or boss. But your mental health and autonomy matter more than maintaining a toxic relationship. Let me share a real example. James worked for a manager named Karen who used manipulation masterfully. When James started the job, Karen was incredibly supportive, praising his work, confiding in him, making him feel like a valued team member. Then the intermittent reinforcement started. Some days, Karen would be warm and encouraging. Other days, she'd be cold, critical, implying James wasn't meeting expectations without specifying how. James became anxious, constantly trying to figure out what he was doing wrong. When he'd bring up specific concerns, Karen would gaslight him. "I never said that. You're being overly sensitive. You're misunderstanding my feedback." She'd compare him to other employees. "Michael never has these issues. Maybe you're not cut out for this role." This triangulation made James feel inadequate and competitive. Karen would also play the victim. I'm under so much stress. I need team members I can rely on. And James, feeling guilty, would work longer hours, take on extra projects, desperate to prove himself. Over a year, James became isolated from colleagues. Karen had subtly discouraged him from building relationships with the team. Anxious, depressed, and convinced he was failing. It wasn't until a trusted friend outside work pointed out that Karen's behavior was abusive that James recognized the manipulation. He documented everything, spoke to HR, and eventually transferred to a different department. Looking back, he realized every single manipulation tactic was present. He just couldn't see it while he was in it. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Manipulation is not about intelligence. Smart, strong, capable people get manipulated all the time because manipulation targets emotions, not logic. It's about recognizing the patterns, trusting yourself, and being willing to prioritize your well-being over maintaining a relationship that's harming you. And if you're watching this and thinking, oh no, I do some of these things, that's actually a good sign. It means you have self-awareness. True manipulators rarely recognize or admit their behavior. If you're concerned you might be manipulative, work with a therapist to understand where these patterns come from and learn healthier ways to meet your needs. So here's your challenge. Think about the relationships in your life. Are there people who leave you feeling consistently confused, anxious, or diminished? People where you're always walking on eggshells or questioning yourself? You don't have to confront them today. Just notice the patterns. Awareness is the first step to freedom. And if this video helped you see something you've been denying, the next one breaks down how to leave a toxic relationship safely. Because recognizing manipulation is one thing, getting out is another. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and remember, you're not crazy. You're not too sensitive. You're seeing clearly, and that's power.